So welcome back to the channel, and in today's video I'm talking about Celine's new obsession with TikTok and other current youth subcultures. But before I continue, you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Fashion Roadman for all your fashion news. Now, when Hedi Slimane first took over Celine, Phoebe Philo fans were up in arms, and it makes a lot of sense because Hedi Slimane's aesthetic is basically a complete 180 compared to Phoebe Philo. Phoebe Philo likes pastel colours, she likes more flowy silhouettes. Hedi Slimane, he likes skinny silhouettes, he likes dark colours, he has sort of like a grunge rocker aesthetic. They're polar opposites. So it makes sense, but what I didn't really understand about the outrage at the time and still now is that yes, Phoebe Philo was at Celine since 2008, but she doesn't own Celine. And Celine had a history before Phoebe Philo, and they will continue to have a history after Phoebe Philo, considering Hedi Slimane was the first designer to design menswear at Celine. You just need to look at Celine clothing from the 80s or when Michael Kors went to Celine, and you'll see that it's completely different to what Phoebe Philo was making. Now, when I think of Hedi Slimane at Celine, I think at first, his first collection at Celine was very Saint Laurent Paris adjacent. It looks very much like what we had seen him do at Saint Laurent. It was very monochromatic, very dark colors, skinny silhouettes, over skinny models. And it was basically just bringing Saint Laurent Paris to Celine. I think he kind of did that just to show that I'm here and this is going to be my Celine, not Phoebe Philo Celine. I think that was him making a statement, because from then on, I've actually really loved his collection, and so far, my favorite Celine collections have been the Fall/Winter 19 ready-to-wear collection, the Spring/Summer 20 menswear, and the Spring/Summer 20 ready-to-wear collections. I thought those were amazing. And to me personally, I think those three collections were the perfect merge between Hedi Slimane's sort of rocker aesthetic with the Parisian bourgeoisie type of Celine aesthetic. And in those collections, Hedi Slimane started to take inspiration from Celine before it was even on the runway, like Celine in the 80s. And you see these long pleated skirts, silk blouses, all design elements of things you would normally see people wear in the 80s, especially when it comes to Celine. And so it's funny, there are Instagram pages like Old Celine that are mainly dedicated to the work of Phoebe Philo, but when you think about where Hedi Slimane was getting inspiration from, it was Old Celine. But by the Spring/Summer 21 collection, Hedi Slimane took a very stark shift in terms of aesthetic, in terms of Celine. Now, the Spring/Summer 21 collection was titled The Dancing Kid, and Hedi Slimane took clear inspiration from TikTok. It's something he's even said in interviews, and I mean, even the name of the collection is called The Dancing Kid. Now, models actually open this show walking on an empty Formula 1 track that is typically used for the French Grand Prix. Now, I think the most interesting aspect of this collection is the soundtrack, for starters, because the soundtrack for this collection and the collection I'm going to talk about after are not the typical Hedi Slimane soundtracks you would hear. So this one is called They Call Me Tiago, Her Name Was Margot, and it's by an artist called Tiags. I think that's how you pronounce it. But what's very interesting about Hedi Slimane choosing Tiags is that Tiags is an artist that has blown up and seen a lot of success via TikTok. Now, in this collection, you can see the clear inspiration from TikTok e-boys and skaters, and you can see all the style signifiers. There are the more obvious ones, like the chains and the jewelry that the models were seen wearing. There was a striped long sleeve shirt that was worn under a tie-dye t-shirt. Very, very clear e-boy reference. Skater shorts, there were a lot of beanies. Some even said the dancing kid around the base. Oversized knitwear, and much more. A channel that I watch a lot called Brave New Wear by Christian actually had an amazing video on this, and he drew more comparisons between sort of like the e-boy aesthetic and the looks in this collection specifically. So definitely a good video to watch just to kind of learn further about this collection. In an interview with Vogue, Hedi Slimane described this show as a documentary collection spanning e-boys and current skate culture, and a candid portrait of a generation that took advantage of the confinement to assert itself and emancipate itself creatively. And this stark transition of aesthetic of Hedi Slimane Celine took a lot of people by surprise. But when you really think about it, it's not that surprising. You can kind of see that Celine has sort of been stamping its mark on TikTok as a platform. The muse for Celine, for example, is Lisa from Blackpink. TikTok is a platform typically known for funny videos and dancing videos. So what you would typically see on TikTok as a platform is people dancing to their favorite K-pop artist music, or you even see them trying to replicate the dance moves that they see their favorite K-pop artists do. A lot of people that didn't even know what Celine was or don't even care for Celine are still interested in Celine just because Lisa from Blackpink is a muse for the brand. If you look at any video really by Loic Prigent on YouTube, you see the huge pandemonium that are outside the Celine runway shows when Lisa turns up. We've also seen TikTok stars like Noen Eubanks be on Celine campaigns. So I think this sort of collection, it was bound to happen, and it's something that has almost been set in stone. And if we look at the aesthetic of this collection, we do see some looks that look very specific to things I've seen TikTok stars like Noen Eubanks or Chase Hudson wear, for example. And while this collection is extremely colourful and more colourful than we've seen from most of Hedi Slimane's work, a lot of people are led to believe that this is clearly targeting younger people, which is the inspiration for this collection. But if you look at the pieces and you break down the pieces, you can actually see that there are still pieces that can be worn by the old Hedi Slimane customer. There's still the biker jackets, there's still the blazers, there's still some tailored pieces. It's just the way it's styled is meant to appeal to a Gen Z audience. And I know a lot of people can't stand TikTok. It's sort of a platform that divides opinions. It's either you love it or you hate it. Now, I personally don't use TikTok, so the collection didn't really appeal to me. It's not my favorite collection. I've already mentioned earlier what my favorite Celine collections are so far. However, I do think it was intelligent, and when reviewing a show, it's not really about what I personally like. Who cares? I think it's what it means culturally and what it signifies to the general public, and just in terms of history, I think that's what matters rather than like one person's personal opinion. And I feel like this was intelligently done by Hedi Slimane. I think designers in general always take inspiration from youth subcultures. It just so happens that the subculture right now is e-boys on TikTok. It's dancers on TikTok. It's because it's in the present, we kind of see it as weird or cringy, but I think looking at it in a few years in hindsight, we'll start to see it as something that was quite incredible and how he documented the time so perfectly. A good example of this is Raf Simons. Raf Simons, when he used to make collections, was seen as, people just didn't really understand it. And it wasn't until we looked at his collections in hindsight that people started to realize, oh, this was intelligently done. This is amazing how he captured the youth essence of the time. So I think this is a collection that will grow on people and it will age really well. And just in general, designers of the present day, including the likes of Raf Simons or brands like Undercover, they reference youth subcultures from the past, whether we're talking about, you know, the punk rockers in the 70s. So I personally think there is no difference between the punk rockers of the 70s and the e-boys now in terms of just referencing a youth subculture. I think it's just now in the present, TikTok is seen as something that is cringy. But when you think of the punk rockers back then, they were seen as misfits. It's not until now that people kind of look at it in some sort of positive light, like, oh wow, that's like a signifier of freedom. And it's not until now that punk rock has sort of been seen as this sort of symbol of liberation. And this is why it came as no surprise that in the next collection, which was the Spring Summer 21 ready-to-wear show, Hedi Slimane described the collection as a portrait of a generation, where he looked to the aesthetics of youthful girls and women for inspiration. Now, this collection was actually showcased on sort of a running track, but it was actually housed in AS Monaco's football stadium, which is quite interesting because now we have the previous collection, which was a Formula One track. We have this collection, which is inside a football stadium, but more specifically on a running track. And a collection after where we saw a lot of horse riding. So there seems to be this sort of thing going on with Celine and sport. So I wonder if we're going to ever see sort of a performance line by Celine, but who knows? And the funny thing about this collection, same thing as the previous collection, is there are still pieces that the Hedi Slimane customer wants. Like I said in the previous collection, in this collection too, we can see leather jackets, tailored blazers, the coats, the blouses, the dresses. And also we see this continued obsession with Celine of the 80s with the way some of the jackets look. I just think the styling is so good that it represents how an early 20-year-old will dress, despite there being a lot of pieces that are considered quote unquote mature or something that an older customer would want. And ultimately, fashion is something that is always in a state of flux. It always changes. So I think people always wanting fashion to stay in the same place isn't actually a good thing. We always want fashion to progress, change, whether people like it or not. I kind of like that aspect of fashion. And the days of women wearing things that sort of constrict their body, and also this idea of aesthetic over comfort, the corsets, the dresses that you can barely breathe in, I think that time is over. I think now, thanks to the likes of people like Phoebe, Philo, people dress more for comfort. And you see that in this collection, whether we're looking at, you know, pieces where models are wearing joggers with jackets, or we see people styling, you know, pleated dresses with boots or sneakers and a dad hat. And this casual luxe aesthetic, which I call it, is something that we see dominate social media if you look at Instagram or TikTok. And despite Hedi Slimane's clear want to kind of reference the bourgeoisie of the 80s in Paris and kind of bring back what Celine was creating at the time, there's also a clear direction in capturing the emerging Gen Z market. And in conclusion, I personally think that Hedi Slimane is starting to find his mojo, for lack of a better term, at Celine. I think so many people love Phoebe, Philo, Celine, as I do too, to the point where anything Hedi Slimane does, they just unobjectively bash it because it isn't Phoebe, Philo, Celine. Now, if you like that aesthetic, there are people who have worked under Phoebe, Philo who kind of make clothing that is sort of similar, whether we're looking at Peter Doe or Daniel Lee's Bottega Veneta. Now, to end the video, Sarah Moa, who is an amazing journalist, had a quote for Vogue that I want to read because I think it captures everything that I've been saying in this video in sort of a short sentence. So what she said was, "Styling and restyling the bourgeois codes of what Celine used to stand for is how he started at this house. Now, interrupting them with how they might be rehandled by French Gen Z on the street or at home is the name of his game." So on that note, let me know your thoughts on just the direction that Celine is going in. How do you feel about the contrast between Hedi Slimane Celine versus Phoebe, Philo, Celine? If you like the video, definitely like it. Subscribe to this channel if you are new. And of course, a lot of work goes into my videos. So if you want to support the channel financially, then I will really appreciate if you subscribe to the Patreon. And the link to that is in the description below. And I know I haven't posted a video in like almost 4 weeks now. The reason for that is now, because I study like journalism at Central St. Martin's and I'm working on my magazine, I don't really have a lot of time, but I'm trying my best to be more consistent. But anyway, I'll be back soon.